Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me for the Can Stutter podcast. Um, I'm Lisa Wilder. I'm on the board of directors for the Canadian Stuttering Association, um, now known as Can Stutter. Um, I'm very happy to have here today Joshua St. Pierre. He is the Canada Research Chair in Critical Disability Studies and an assistant professor of political science at the University of Alberta. He is known in the stuttering community for his writing and disability studies, for his participation in conferences, for his for creating the website Stuttering Commons, and his book Cheap Talk: Disability and the Politics of Communication was published 4 years ago. Joshua, thank you for joining me. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. I guess I'll start off. I have a lot to ask. I just wanted to say I found your work and your writing very fascinating. I don't always understand it entirely, but I've really enjoyed being introduced to the ideas that you explore, particularly in your book, Cheap Talk. But I'd like to begin this podcast asking you about Stuttering Commons, the website that you helped create. Um, in it, you talk about the website talks about a deconstructing fluency privilege. Can you speak a bit about what that means?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So just off the bat, the the project Stuttering Commons is created by a group of 10 or so international um, stuttering artists and clinicians and theorists and community organizers. And we have tried to create knowledge, especially for people who stutter, um, about what stuttering is, but also and trying to understand stuttering in a different framework than oftentimes what is given to us. Um, and part of this project, I guess, is understanding what fluency is and how it affects people who stutter. So oftentimes, so deconstructing fluency privilege in this context would mean that instead of always assuming that stuttering and disfluency is something that needs to be fixed if speech is to be if our speech is to be included in the world, it rather turns the tables and says, can we change how we think about speech to change this social fabric itself such that disfluent speech can can appear on its own terms. So we don't have to fix, well, the goal then is to fix this society that has such a narrow definition of what counts as valuable, and to say no, there's Um, Stuttered speech can be valuable too. We, we just have to change. And of course, this is a much bigger task, but it's not an impossible task. But we have to change how society culture thinks about the value of speech and to dismantle a really narrow way of thinking about valuable speech is only fluent.
Yes, and I think that leads in to the other topic that's discussed in the manifesto on that website is about revising therapeutic approaches to stuttered speech through stutter affirming conversations and dialogues. I thought in relation to stuttering treatment, what should an encounter between a therapist and a person who stutters look like?
Yes. So this is that's a really yes. So this is something that my colleagues Chris Constantino and Sam Simpson, who's from the UK, have spent a lot of time thinking about. Um, and so my colleague Sam oftentimes says that, well, when people come into a therapy room for the first time, oftentimes what they want is fluency, right? Um, but always says that it doesn't take her very long to start to have a conversation with the person to realize that fluency per se isn't what people are necessarily. What people want more basically is to be long in this world. They want to have meaningful relationships. They want community. They want to be understood. They want to be able to speak more freely. They want, like all these kinds of things that they want, and they assume because the force of fluency is so strong in our society that fluency is the pathway to get to all these other things. But what's interesting is that my colleagues in SLP who are thinking about stuttering in a more critical way have really found that there's way more different there's a lot more different things that can be done in a therapy room, um, besides just doing speech skills, to get towards these other things like social belonging and spontaneous communication. Um, so sometimes that can be doing more like trauma-based therapy, to understand what one's relationship to one's voice and to other people are, and to like unpack a lot of the meaning that's been given to stuttered speech and the weight that stuttered speech has. But there can be all kinds of creative things that happen, um, in order to help people speak on their own terms. So it's kind of like I kind of see the clinic as like mini laboratory where like a clinician and a client can like experiment with different ways of relating to their own speech, and then trying these things out in the world. Um, and oftentimes what happens as a side effect is that people end up becoming a more fluent anyways. So I chased myself. I chased fluency for like a very long time when I was a teenager and a young adult. Um, and I was very convinced that I wouldn't have meaningful relationships and a job and all these kinds of things unless I could be fluent. But the less I attached the less attached I got to fluency, as a byproduct, I found that I was speaking a more fluently anyways. So so there's all and I was just happier in the in the same time. So I think that just focusing on speech skills within therapy, we really restrict what is kind of possible um, in that room and what's possible for us as well.
Yes, y- y- yes, I agree that there's I mean, times when I've felt engaged in the world and a part of something, and I've found just that whole feeling has helped my speech indirectly. And
Mhm.
it's funny how you can take that kind of hack to get better speech. But I'd like to go on to, and I think this ties into it, but in your book, Cheap Talk, you critique fluent speech and discuss how today the world of media, it's funny. There was a time when talking on the telephone was one of the biggest challenges a stutterer had. And today, telephones aren't even associated with are I think younger generations, in particular, a phone isn't even really something you talk into. It's people text and uh, and in a way, and email and there's a in one way, in one sense, our world has become less verbal, but in another sense that you talk about in your book, it's become there's this huge reliance on verbal speech in the world of media of podcasting in the media landscape, and you talk about and social media channels, and you talk about how this approach to politics has in fact become very limiting and and constraining. We won't be able to discuss the whole book here, of course,
Mhm.
but can you address this issue that I thought that was kind of at the heart of your book?
Yeah. So in the book, I talk about the ways, well, there's kind of three characters that kind of like threaded their way through the whole book. And that's the characters of the talking head, the troll, and the disfluent speaker. And the talking head, like classically, of course, was the newscaster on TV who had to be like this perfectly articulate person who could communicate clearly and efficiently. And of course, a talking head in the world of production, they say that nothing is there by accident. And so everything, every like vocal inflection has to be there on purpose because it all conveys a very specific meaning, and there and of course time as well. The idea of there being dead air on a podcast or a radio show. If we're going back further, I mean, they still have radio, of course, but like dead air is like the very worst thing that could possibly happen. Um, and so the space always has to be filled, but filled in like a perfectly fluent way, right? So the talking head has now migrated to TikTok and Instagram, where um, to for your message to carry in the way you want it to, it has to be able to go viral, or it has to be really like really really sticky, as they talk about. Like the idea has to have like it has to like stick in people's heads in really clearly defined ways. Um, and it has to be like an easily understood idea. And I think perhaps like that is the most detrimental for people who stutter, um, is this idea um, that communication has to be easily said, and if it can't be easily said, it's not worth saying at all. It's not worth being understood. And so all these forces kind of like combine it in a way, um, in a way that um, makes stuttering particularly undesirable from a position of media studies and like media, like how media works online. So I think that this like goal of being a talking head is really constraining for people who stutter, um, because it means that our words are not taken with as they're not given as much weight, right? They're not they're taken to be less valuable because we disrupt all these really highly valued norms of clarity, of speed, of efficiency, of being easily understood, right? If there's anything that I mean, one thing stuttering this fluency does is it like makes people who listen stretch their ears and to like have to like to work harder at understanding and listening.
Yes, and I just wanted to say I really enjoyed your book there.
Well, thank you.
It's very the and after reading it, I could see a lot of incidents happening in the news, in the podcast realm, in the with all those the characters, and see what you're talking about happening in real time.
Mm.
Um, so this, so but I would like to ask, and it has to do with that about stuttering culture, about how do we build that culture that you talk about at the website Stuttering Commons? How is that created?
Yeah, that's a really important question, I think. Um, and I think, I mean, Shell is right that stuttering is so often a very isolating thing. And growing up, um, I definitely felt that, like, but there's something, like as your question is pointing to, the antidote to isolation is culture. It is community and culture. Um, and there's Southern culture over the past, say, 10 years even has increased dramatically. And it's really, really like encouraging to see the ways in which stuttering is being approached from, especially from artistic practitioners. So, I mean, I'm the most obvious ones that I can think of off the top of my head are J- Jerome Ellis. And if anyone hasn't heard Jerome's work, I really recommend to go check it out. Um, but people like Luke Wyland, people like Connor Foran, is doing a lot of really important work here. They just so there's a group of people called People Who Stutter Create, and they have just released their second project. I think it's in display in, oh boy, I want to say Amsterdam, but that's not right. But it's somewhere um, in that area, and they have like these huge billboards plastered on the side of the wall. That Connor is like he's created his own font that is disfluent to show to represent like to represent blocks and prolongations and repetitions um in visual form, which is really cool. And they have repeated with like something like 16 different languages. Stuttering can create time in this stuttered font on this huge billboard on the side of a building. And it's really very cool. This kind of work that's being done in public. Um, and the goal for these kind of things is to like get us to, well, both to think differently about stuttering, but also to feel differently about stuttering, and to realize that no, stuttering is actually part of the human condition. It's been here for a very long time. It's been a part of what it means. It's been a part of the human community for a very, very long time, and I believe it's going to be here for a very long time too. And so, what can we, instead of always trying to fix it, what can we gain from stuttering? What can we learn from stuttering? What can stuttering teach us? Both who stutter, but also like a wider culture. Like, what is there? What is lost when we exclude stuttering from this common world? I think and so stuttering can create time. It's just this wonderful phrase that is so powerful. But that's just like one small instance of the ways in which culture is really trying to be created around stuttering, and there's art and community that's springing up around stuttering all over the place now, and I think it's going to have a big impact on the place that stuttering can hold within the social fabric.
I mean, yes, and we have our conference coming up in August in St. John's, Newfoundland. Um, I just wanted to mention that to our listeners here, that it's the schedule is up on the website, so check that out too. But Joshua, what is coming up for you now? Are you doing more writing, or is teaching taking up your time, or what is coming up for you down the road?
I'm actually just coming, just finishing up my sabbatical. So I've had a year now without teaching where I've just been writing. So I wrote my second book and I'm about to send it off to publishers when I can find the courage to do so. um,
Wow. Well, I can't wait. I can't wait to read that.
Thank you. Yeah.
So everybody, I've been talking here with Joshua St. Pierre. He is the author of Cheap Talk, and he is and the one of the creators and contributors to the website Stuttering Commons. So Joshua, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Lisa.